Good afternoon and welcome to the Weekend Wellness Hour. Today we have a friend of mine, a good friend of mine who I met about a year ago at a Hell Elrod event where we're looking at building our best life ever. And one of the speakers, Jesse Harless, was speaking about addiction and recovery. And I got a chance to meet him, talk to him. We kind of bonded a little bit. And I thought Jesse would be a great addition to our wellness show to bring about a talk about addictions because there's so many types of addictions in our lives. We all struggle with some form of it. And it's great. Sometimes it's harder than others. And Jesse has an amazing story. He has done so much with his life, and his work has helped hundreds and thousands of people. So I'd like to bring him on today and share him with all of you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jesse.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. It was really exciting to meet you too at the Best Year Ever event a couple years ago. So
Yeah,
awesome time.
yeah, that's wonderful. So you've done a lot with your life. I know you have a master's in mental health counseling, correct? Is that right?
Yep.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up where you are?
Yeah. So the high level version is, I was someone who grew up in a single parent household, and my dad left at 4. And I won't tell the whole story, but I like to start there just because that's kind of where this idea of I would be, I was unlovable, or if I got close to someone, they would just leave me. This idea of abandonment. So it was a fear, a trauma that was instilled really early, and that really stayed with me right up into my 30s until I did some more deep, some more deep work on myself and the dark night of the soul, as they would call it, maybe. And in 2020 was really the year where I did most of that work. So it's been quite a journey, but that's kind of where it started. And then from there, it led into, there was many good moments, but there was a lot of moments of addiction all throughout, behavioral addictions, and then actual substance abuse addictions that ended up happening in my late teenage years into my early 20s, which led to me being arrested. And that's kind of where things started at 22 years old. I started to have, I found a recovery at 22, and I started to just change the way I was living. And I'm being really general because I'm sure we're going to dive into that. But, at 22, I found recovery. And from there, I started to surround myself with mentors and people that I looked up to. And what they were doing was they were not being held back by the past, whether they were a felon or whether they were, no matter their addiction, no matter their mental health diagnosis or condition, they weren't being held back. And my friends were becoming lawyers, they were becoming teachers, they were becoming business owners. And I'm like, wow. So I really stayed close to these individuals who are, entrepreneurs in recovery and people who are doing things in recovery, which I didn't even know was possible. No one ever told me this was possible, even when I wasn't in recovery. So I just latched on. And so eventually I went in to get my degree in mental health counseling because there was a lot of mental health issues going on in my own life. So I wanted to study my own self and things that I've healed in myself to be able to serve others and ask myself, how can I help? How can I serve? And so that led to the work that I'm doing today with Entrepreneurs in Recovery.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And the one phrase that you said, that they didn't let the past kind of define them, they moved beyond that. And that's really powerful because a lot of times we hear something from someone or we experience something and we're stuck in that label. And it's hard to move past that unless you really are forward thinking, you're visualizing, you're kind of letting go of that past. So that's really powerful that you said that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, and part of it too is visualization too. And like Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. And I think he had it right. I think in a lot of ways, if we kind of look to of what's possible in the future, having like a future-based mindset, but still living in the now, because I'm someone who loves to live in the now, but having visions and intentions for the future, I think really helps set the tone. Because if not, if you just let the media or the world dictate where you're going, I mean, just look at where we are today. And so I really, I appreciate that idea of visualization, even in prayer and meditation, to do that, to take the religiosity out of it, and just the
Yeah.
power of just visualizing and seeing, like, even my day, like, what am I going to do today? Like, I'm going to get up and I'm going to maybe set some intentions, maybe I'll do some stretching, maybe I'll make a juice, and kind of see, where do I want to be today? What is my intentions? And then at the end of the day, reviewing that, maybe journaling, hey, what happened today? You know,
Yeah.
who did I serve? Who did I help? What was the challenges?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so visualization is a big part of my life too.
That's wonderful. So I'm curious if we can dive back kind of when you're in that addiction, substance abuse stage. Looking back now, was there a trigger? Was it a lot of your beliefs that kind of led to to staying in that substance abuse world, or have you figured that out yet?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm finishing up a book that's coming out next month, and it's
Yeah.
about that exact thing you're saying.
Okay.
So that's why I started with that 4-year-old experience, me,
Mhm.
Jesse, at 4 years old, because a lot of times we don't realize it starts in childhood. It starts with the 3-year-old self, the 2-year-old self, the
Yeah.
5-year-old self, the 7-year-old self. And for me, it was the 4-year-old self. And so, yeah, so definitely there were stories that were playing out and belief systems that I held on to because of these situations that happened that I couldn't control. And the ones I could control, it was like, what's the point anyways? Like, life is going to be a struggle. Like, why does it even matter? If my dad was an addict, I'm going to be an addict. You know, what does it matter? So there was a lot of that helplessness and learned helplessness. And that led into, like I said, some behavioral addictions that eventually turned into me becoming very good at isolating. I became a professional isolator. I would isolate. And now with this pandemic, it's the, pandemic of isolation for a lot of
Yeah.
us. So ironically, now we're going through this as a collective whole. But for me, growing up and in my teenage years, I isolated a lot, especially when I found drugs and alcohol. It became a way for me to maybe be around people to get what I needed, but eventually I was on my own again. And, you know, the opposite of addiction is connection, as they say, or the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection, as we've heard
Mhm.
said. And so I truly, truly believe that the older I get and the more I learn is we need community. We need community
Yeah.
more than ever. We need to be able to
Yeah.
share our authentic self with people we feel safe with. And if we don't have that, we're in big trouble. And I'm not talking about for substance abuse and alcohol addiction. I'm talking about for all addictions, food
Yeah.
addiction, having old beliefs that just won't go away and really being stuck in that perpetual loop. And so I think, today more than ever, that's something that I can't stress enough about. Building a recovery team is what I call it, or your
Yeah.
circle of five, or your tribe of people that you can call and share your authentic self with. And they're not going to judge you or send weird energy your way or vibrations. Like you're going to be able to share that to them and they're going to be like, oh, thanks for sharing that. I can feel that. And really,
Yeah. And that's so important. It's neat to see how you shifted in your life. And I can imagine now with the pandemic, with this isolation, it's even harder for those who are going through, struggles with addiction right now, trying to find that community. And imagine, have you used Zoom or encourage other people to use Zoom and finding ways to have virtual sessions to help people with addictions and struggles?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this
Yeah.
platform has been a godsend. I have,
Yeah.
so let me give you an example of some of the work I do with recovery facilitation. So I started working with the state of Georgia, which was called the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse. And this is 34 organizations that are spread throughout Georgia. And what they do is they are nonprofits that help people in addiction recovery for no charge at all. And so
Wow.
these communities hired me to come in 2020
Wow.
to facilitate in person 9 different times. And when
Oh,
COVID hit, I did all of it virtually. So we ran
okay.
over 10 virtual events with hundreds and hundreds I think over 600 people in recovery and addiction recovery and early recovery and long-term recovery. We ran virtual events to connect them to their purpose, to connect them to their strengths, to connect them to their vision, and also to help to crowdsource the actual organization so that they can come up with strategic initiatives, all virtually, all on Zoom. And so, yes, absolutely. And I've run many workshops on Zoom as well, that have been free. I just ran when COVID hit in March and April. I ran about 10 different 90-minute workshops on Zoom, and these are highly choreographed workshops. There's lots of breakout
Mm.
rooms. There's
Yeah.
there's a lot of structure to them and choreography, and so. because it's really when you're bringing people into a space online, and this is true in person as well, you really want to build psychological safety as soon as quick as possible. And Zoom actually allows you to do that because of the powerful features of the breakout rooms.
Yeah. Yeah, that's truly incredible. So you touched on food addictions. Can we go into what are some of the, what are all the addictions out there that, some of the more common ones? We hear substance abuse and alcohol. Sometimes we don't hear about some of the other ones that are out there that people could actually be suffering from and don't even realize it themselves.
Yeah. Well, I keep thinking of this book. It's called
Yeah.
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe
Hmm.
Dispenza. And it's a really great book because he talks about being addicted to our emotions. We become
Hmm.
addicted to certain emotions, even negative emotions,
Yeah.
because those have a payoff, and they have a payoff chemically. And so when we're in this when we have this certain belief system about ourselves and about the world, we can continue to play out this story, this narrative in our head, and it's actually feeding certain types of neurochemicals that are keeping us stuck. So you can
Hmm.
actually get addicted to being unhappy. You can get addicted to power.
Yeah.
You can get addicted. We know the other addictions that might be more common is food or shopping,
Hmm.
gambling, pornography is a huge one off the
Yeah.
rails at this moment. So these are ones that are socially accepted actually in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, some of the more subtler ones is the addiction to unhappiness.
Yeah.
And when I say this, some people this will resonate to because they really take a look and they wake up in the morning and they're not happy. They wake up with anxiety. And these are people who don't struggle with addiction, right?
Yep.
So it's, these are the things of like, how do we address the root cause of why we feel like that? And
Yeah.
that's kind of the things that I'm interested in. That's some of the things I address in my book is how do we actually address the root causes instead of just treating symptoms, which we've been doing for a long time and it hasn't been working.
Right. So that was actually my next question. So what are some of the common treatments? So when you were 22 years old and you got arrested and you're going through that, did you enter a traditional recovery program at that point?
Yeah, I actually did not. So
Okay.
the interesting part was at 22 years old when I was arrested, I had a few weeks prior, I had got my full-time job back. So when
Um,
they had arrested me, and it took a while for the trial, for the pretrial to play
yeah.
out, they wanted to send me to federal prison. I it didn't make any sense to send me to prison. Just like it
Yeah.
doesn't make a lot of sense to send many of the people we send to prison. It's because they have drug and alcohol disorder, or substance use disorders. And so we're sending them to prison, locking them in a cage, and then we're expecting them to find serenity and treatment and come out and be a productive citizen. Well, it's actually the opposite effect many of the times. Now, sometimes it does help, and I have plenty
Yeah.
of friends who've been to prison that really helped them turn their life around. But for the majority,
Mhm.
for me, the prescription was you're going to go to the meetings, so 12-step meetings. You're going to check in with the probation officer. You're going to go to your groups that you have, because I went to other groups and mentor groups, and you're going to work
Okay.
full time. There was no drug court for me. I don't know if you know what those are, but there was no drug
Yeah.
courts.
Yeah.
There was no rehab for me. There was none of that. They said your
Mhm.
prescription for recovery is 12-step groups, working full time, and doing the next right thing. That was it. So I did what they told me. It was I was on federal probation, so I did what they said, and it happened to be just the right thing because it gave me structure, and that's kind of how I've structured my book. Is these early days of structure and keeping it simple and telling myself a daily affirmation, which was do the next right thing, do the next right thing, do the next right
Yeah.
thing. Even if I didn't know what that is, intuitively, we all know what the next right thing is. So I just followed my intuition, and I literally just went to the support groups. I grabbed a sponsor. I grabbed a mentor. I had a drug and alcohol counselor. I was going to a men's group. I went all in. And I had to go all in because I had panic disorder and I had alcoholism and I had all these other things. So,
Yeah.
the first year was very, very difficult, especially if anyone knows about panic disorder. It's a tough thing to deal with in early recovery because you're doing everything you can, but then all of a sudden you're having massive panic attacks in public, and it's quite And I think people can relate who might be listening to this. If you've ever had panic attacks or panic attack disorder, it's like you're having a heart attack. It's really, really intense. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so hopefully I answered your question. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I'm curious, so luckily you got into the right type of structure when you were in those initial stages of recovery. Did that change then now over time once you kind of went through that first few months of that structure that they gave you of working in the recovery program? How did it shift over time for you?
Yeah, well, when you said that word structure, you reminded me of what I've heard recently, that structure creates culture.
Yeah.
Structure creates culture. So I was actually creating a culture in a world of recovery because I
Mhm.
found structure. I actually had a culture of recovery that I was developing inwardly and outwardly. Um, so yeah, that structure is so key, and that's why like I started keep bringing up my book, but focus on
Yeah.
your recovery is the first part of what I teach in my toolkit, which is to
Mhm.
focus on your recovery. And when people hear that, they go, "Well, I don't struggle with drugs and alcohol." It doesn't matter. Your recovery could be from this pandemic that we're having and keeping healthy and keeping your immunity up. So
Yeah.
staying in recovery from maybe even health or disease. And so focus on your recovery is really about how do I focus and write down in my daily planner, whether that's digitally on my phone or in a to-do list, what are the things today that are going to boost my immunity? What are the things today that are going to help me focus on my recovery and help
Yeah.
me to live my best life? And so that's kind of the first thing is structure to me is what kind of structure could we build, because we were creating the opposite structure, right? We were creating a structure that was chaotic, and it was an environment that you were attracting the exact same people where I was that were in those places of dilemma, of trauma, of pain. And so
Yeah.
that pain gets just replayed over and over again as we numb out with foods and technology and drugs
Yeah.
and alcohol. And so
Absolutely. And I completely can understand that. I like that you're talking about the structure, and I imagine that structure that needs to be created is different for everyone. And it may take a deep dive, right, to figure out what is really needed for each individual person.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Recovery is holistic. And anyone who
Yeah.
says it's not, run for the hills. And a lot of times when
Yeah.
people find recovery, they're only told there's only a couple options. You can go to treatment, you can get on medication, you go to AA, where you go
Mhm.
to NA, and that's that. And the
Yeah.
truth is, that's not that.
Yeah.
And it is true that those are great starts to recovery. And those are great ways to find structure and find people who
Yeah.
have battled similar conditions. And I could say this for anything, Sex Addicts Anonymous or
Mhm.
Overeaters Anonymous or any of these structures. You find people in recovery that you're able to talk to, which can be helpful. But then what? You still get
Yeah.
your whole life to live. So what are you doing with your life? And that's where, you know, you can branch out and read books like Russell Brand's book where he breaks
Mhm.
down the 12 steps. And maybe if you're like, well, I don't like the 12 steps. Okay, well, read the Success Principles by Jack Canfield and come up with some of these goals to set goals for your life. Or read my new book coming up, which has a
Yeah.
recovery toolkit. And so my point is that you can branch out and find mentors in different areas. Like I love branching into quantum science and learning about even Newtonian, all of it to mix so I can synthesize the data to choose my own holistic version of recovery, which can involve, heart math,
Yeah.
meditations. It can involve this holistic and especially nourishment in the foods I'm putting into my mouth, what I'm eating, what I'm
Mhm.
drinking, what I'm putting on my skin, the thoughts I'm
Yeah.
thinking, the way I'm feeling. All of that matters when it comes to optimal recovery.
Yeah. Looking back, there's a lot of talk about the fight or flight nervous system right now, sympathetic versus parasympathetic. Looking back, have you ever reflected on how much you were in fight or flight mode and you used the drugs or alcohol to kind of try to help numb you, try to help calm you down, but it really wasn't doing it? It may spur you on. Have you ever reflected on that? I'm just curious.
100%. I reflected on that in my first book called Smash Your
Yeah.
Comfort Zone with Cold Showers and in this book. Yeah,
Yeah.
because when you're in addiction,
Mhm.
when I say addiction, I'm blanketing addiction to all of us globally, not just drugs and
Yes.
alcohol. our mind loves to put it into drugs and alcohol, but I'm
Yeah.
blanking it for all. When you do that, you're in survival mode. And in
Yeah.
fact, I just read a quote that 80% of people are living in survival mode right now, regardless of addiction.
Yeah.
80%. So,
Yeah.
absolutely, we are living from the sympathetic nervous system, which has its benefits, absolutely. But
Hmm.
we live there when the demands outweigh the resources, as my friend Dr. Danny Friedland would say, as the demands outweigh the resources, we are living from a state of survival and safety. And I think now, maybe more than ever, we are living in that time,
Yeah.
and it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it affects our whole body, it affects our whole life, it affects all of our interactions. And one of the things that I was picking up when you were talking about recovery is the, it's a lot of personal development, a lot of studying ourselves, studying our health, studying how we can change our mind and our thoughts. So it's not just this, 12 steps to recovery or whatever the recovery, you know, protocol is for that type of addiction, but it's really diving in deep to many aspects of our lives. And sometimes I also have to say the general population isn't, aware of personal development. I know I wasn't a couple of years ago. I was suffering from food addictions and I had cravings all the time. And I had no idea what was going on. Started doing deep dives into personal development. I could feel a shift. I could feel how I was stuck in those habits that you were talking about, where my neurochemistry was set to when's my next meal? When can I snack again? How much can I eat? And I managed to maintain, I gained weight, but I didn't gain too much because I was running. So I used running to help combat that. But, we find our path in life, but a lot of times it comes down to, okay, how do we slow down and really look at the problem, which is scary, very, very scary in itself.
Yeah, thanks for sharing about that and being
Yeah.
vulnerable and sharing about food
Yeah.
addiction, because I think many people are suffering in silence right now. And I think
Mhm.
that it's okay to come out. If you find people you're safe with,
Mhm.
to share that, because then once we start to admit that, we can start to break through old
Yeah.
paradigms and
Yeah.
really get to the core of issue of what's going on. And absolutely, yeah, you hear like, and I'm going to refer it back to health, like, because personal development also helps you to start to learn about nutrition, because it will lead
Mhm.
to this fact of like, how do I be at my best? How do I be my best self? How do I be my authentic self? And
Yeah.
it leads to also discovering about what I'm putting into my body, what I'm like. And so absolutely, personal development for me, like, let's just be real about this. In 2015, I found the Miracle Morning book, and I
Yeah.
read that book. And a lot of people read that book and they go, oh, not for me, to this, to that. But if you
Yeah.
really dissect the 6 actions that it has and
Mhm.
really apply them, for me, it was, it changed everything for me. And
Yeah.
that's how we end up meeting, me and you, is
Yeah.
because I read the Miracle Morning in 2015, and in 2016. So in 2015, I also started cold showers. And then in 2016, I won the highest award my company had to offer. And it was a snowball that kept building,
Yeah.
eventually leading me to being on stage, sharing as someone in addiction recovery who is broken of all brokenness,
Yeah.
and be able to be up on that stage because I invested in personal development and my spiritual life and my emotional life and my mental life. So all those different, all those different areas are important.
Yeah. And it's amazing. I just know you, on stage and how you've blossomed, and it's amazing to hear stories because sometimes when we see people on stage, we see them having this beautiful life. We don't know what's underneath. We don't know the struggles and the hard work that was put in to get to that stage. So I appreciate you sharing that because it's a reality that all of us have struggles. Sometimes we just need to meet the right person to help us spur us along in our development to examine, our thoughts, our beliefs. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm forever grateful for the people that came before me to show me the way. And it wasn't my way, it was their way. But I
Yeah.
used their way and 17 other people's ways to figure out what works best for me. And
Mhm.
I think that's the beauty of life, is that we don't have to have just one way. we can continue to evolve and grow just like our cells continue to replenish and grow in our bodies every day, and especially once a year, you get a full replenishment of cells. It's the same thing with our knowledge and data. We can continue to learn more and ask questions. And that's really what's been most helpful for me, because I was very rigid. I was rigid with my diet. I was rigid with my beliefs. I was rigid. And that rigidity left to physical ailments. It led to more addictions and poor habits. So absolutely, letting
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. So, and that's a hard thing to do. So I'm curious now, let's say someone is just starting their recovery. They realize they have an addiction. They want to get help. They may reach out. You offered some books that would be great for them. Let's say they need a community. What are some options out there if people need a community?
So if I'm to be really honest,
Yeah.
that's one of our biggest weaknesses as a society
Hmm.
is recovery communities. Where are
Hmm.
they? Really,
Yeah.
the recovery communities that exist are through fellowships of the 12 steps. And so
Okay.
those are very powerful communities. But what if that doesn't resonate?
Yeah.
Where do you go? And that's the mystery. Where do you go?
Got
There's
it.
not a lot of places, but Georgia, like to bring up Georgia again, to talk about the
Hmm.
recovery community organization of Georgia, people have places to go for free, because these places, they could find yoga and art therapy and all these
Hmm.
different modalities of help for free. So we need to really work on this as building recovery communities, recovery ecosystems to help, because there's so much need there. There's so much need. There's so much homelessness. I mean, it's all
Yeah.
related. It all ties in. And so having a place we can go, and of course, like some people find church, that's their place, or a synagogue or a temple.
Yeah.
But where's the actual recovery community where we can get together? So part of my mission is to help to build some of those communities. And I have a small community of that, but there's a huge
Hmm.
opportunity to collaborate our strengths and build bigger recovery communities. So if a mother was asking me, which I get all the time, what do I do for my daughter who's 19, who's struggling with fentanyl and heroin addiction,
Yeah.
and she's now a week in recovery? What do I do? Where do I send
Yeah.
her? First of all, I'd recommend going into treatment, longer term treatment, if that's affordable. If it's not,
Mhm.
that's where it gets really tricky. So I
Yeah.
say find a recovery coach, work with a recovery coach, a certified
Okay.
or peer recovery coach, so that so she can stay accountable to someone who is not just talking about diagnoses in psychology or psychiatry. They're talking about bettering your life and goals and things that might resonate more. So these are the great questions, Amy. We have to try to
Yeah.
answer ourselves as a collective. Is how do we build more recovery communities?
Yeah. That's amazing. And now your community that you kind of referenced, is that your entrepreneurs in recovery? Is that the one that you're referencing, or is that something separate?
So entrepreneurs in recovery is related to my recovery facilitation business. So
Mhm.
I facilitate change through prisons and drug courts and mental health centers and recovery community organizations. So that's really a way to train people so that they can be armed with the skills of facilitation mastery. And I've of
Nice.
course learned that from exchange and learning
Yeah.
from John Berghoff, but having
Mhm.
that ability to take that into the mental health and recovery space is what entrepreneurs recovery is. Will I have
Yeah.
a community with my new book to be able to
Mhm.
bring people in through possibly Facebook or another one of the newer online platforms?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that could be a place where people could go virtually. Mhm.
Wonderful. Let's dive into your book a little bit more. So it's launching soon, right? And
It's
next
launching on,
month?
yeah, February 22nd.
Okay, wonderful. And so you mentioned it goes through your story a little bit, and can you share a little bit more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So literally, it's a hybrid book. It's a self-help
Okay.
memoir. So it's
Okay.
a publisher's nightmare or a dream, because I didn't write a memoir and I didn't write a self-help book. I wrote a
Oh,
hybrid. Because the reason I did this is because why I trusted my intuition, and my
yeah.
intuition told me that you need to tell your whole story to open the book, and then tell the solution you found for yourself
Yeah.
that's true for you. And that's how I wrote it. So the book starts with an intro
Hmm.
about what you're about to expect. And then it goes
Yeah.
right into my whole story with all the
Wow.
traumas and messes and all of it. And then it goes right into a recovery toolkit, which I call the Fears Recovery Toolkit. Fears.
Okay.
Because right now we're living in a world of fear mongering and just
Yeah.
fear everything. So
Yeah.
I actually believe that you can turn your fear into power and into a compass to direct yourself to get out of your comfort zone. And
Okay.
so my acronym FEARS is the recovery toolkit that people can follow. And it's all of the tools I've learned in 15 years of recovery. I celebrated 15 years of recovery on December 18th. And this is the tools that I learned. And the acronym FEARS is focus on your recovery, elevate your recovery, appreciate your recovery, resilience in recovery, and self-care in recovery. And those are the 5 things that really help to turn my life around, because within each of those is action steps that I put in the book that you take in every single part of the book. And so that's kind of the shorter version, but that's
Yeah.
the book in a nutshell.
I like that because a lot of times we'll read information, we take it in, we absorb it, and then it's okay, now what? How do I integrate this into my life? So the fact that you're taking each of those steps and giving them ideas and suggestions, people can see, okay, what resonates with me? That's really powerful. It really gives people that next step to go to. So, and then your book is called If Not You, Then Who, correct?
That's right.
Okay. And is it launching on Amazon?
Yeah, so I'm self-publishing it, so I'm going to launch it on
Okay, good.
Amazon first, and
Okay.
so you can find it on Amazon. And I don't even have my book cover done. So, for those worrying about, oh, I'll write a book, and they wait 10 years and never write a book, and then they're like, okay, now I'm going to write a book because 2020 and 2021, the world's been crazy. I don't even
Hmm.
have my book cover done yet, so don't worry about it. Just write the book, and
Yeah.
then do the next steps. But so I don't even have my book cover finished, and that's totally fine, because
Yeah.
I'm just grateful that the book is written, and that whatever the book cover is going to be, maybe it'll be this turtle back here. Maybe I'll just put this turtle on the book cover, and that turtle will guide you to recovery. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it's all good. But it will come out next month. That's going to happen.
That's wonderful. So I'm curious, and this you may or not be able to answer this, but on a day-to-day basis, are you still fighting those demons, or is your head in a space where you're not in that fear, you're not in that, okay, that little bit of worry? Are you out of it, or is it still a daily practice?
So it definitely is a daily practice for sure.
Hmm.
It is, it
Yeah.
is, it truly is one day at a time when it
Yeah.
comes to daily practices. And that's really what the
Hmm.
book is about. It's practical daily habits.
Okay.
And so yes, yes. And let's give you an example. So a lot of people, because I have clinical mental health counseling degrees, because I have long-term recovery, people think I don't struggle. People don't think I don't
Yeah.
have things from the past that come up or traumas that come up.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true. But the difference today is when it happens, I get away from low vibrational people. I get away from people who are bringing me down. I get away from media. I get away from the phone, and I go into
Hmm.
myself, and I take
Yeah.
time for deep self-care, radical self-care, because self-care really is sacred. It
Yeah.
really is what has been the differentiator with the issues and the tissues and the trauma that I've experienced. It's made all of the difference. So when I get those moments, like in early COVID, like when back in March and April, not only was was it a really scary place in the unknown, the people I was coaching and helping were having meltdowns, and people that
Yeah.
I was sponsoring were relapsing, and it was really pandemonium. And so that was the time where, instead of going into learned helplessness, which is what I was doing in the past, or going into the sympathetic nervous system and
Yeah.
into survival mode, I went into my self-care practices even deeper. And
Yeah.
for that, it could be different things for people. It could be walking outside barefoot and earthing. It could be walking in nature. It could be, really drinking more water, eating more fruits, doing things that are going to help boost your immunity, but doing all the things that are going to help you be at your best.
Yeah.
Because if not, you're stuck right in the rat race. And today, more than ever, we need to slow down, because slowing down helps us to speed up. And so that really, when today that does happen, and it still does, especially if I decide that, oh, I'll just skip my morning routine, and I'll just skip my nighttime routine, and I'll just see what happens. I've been there and done that. What
Hmm.
happens is I get anxiety, depression,
Yeah.
overwhelm. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's just kind of like brushing your teeth or getting dressed. It's something that it's just part of the routine that I just don't miss doing, some type of morning self-care routine.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And I know some people have, in conversations, have said, oh, you're very rigid. And I don't look at it as a rigidity and my structure of my life. I look at it as I'm excited I have a solution. to help me feel better. And so we can change our mindset and, help us stay on track because we know we're going to feel that much better when we've incorporated things in our lives that really do boost our mood, increase our vibration and energy.
Yeah, to me it's necessity.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm rigid. It's
Yeah.
necessity. It's like, oh, I need to be in the sun. I need
Yeah.
to drink water. I need to eat
Yeah.
food. Well, I need to do self-care. It's a necessity. Um, and the beautiful part is even self-care is holistic. So you got to find what's true for you. For me, it's
Mm-hmm.
having lots of nature in my house, having lots of
Yeah.
plants, having running water. You know, um, you know, it could be certain smells happening in the house. It could be having a rebounder. If you don't know what that is, it's a mini trampoline. There's all these things that even that light back there, like that light is calming to me. That's why I have
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
regardless if you like it or not. It's like, so create a sacred space in your home where you feel a higher, like you said, a higher vibration, and then also surround yourself with people
Mm-hmm.
that are like that. And if you work with people who are not like that, that's okay. When you get away from those people, find your people and
Yeah.
find people that are helping to lift you up. And that's what I try to do every single day, even if it's just text messages, just sending a text to someone and saying, hey, I'm checking in, how's it going? And just getting their text back in response.
Yeah.
But we also have beautiful YouTube, and we have so many ways to boost our mood through incredible podcasts, or listening to this
Yes.
podcast, or going into YouTube and just typing in, like, someone who lifts your spirit up. Because we all have a
Mm-hmm.
choice. We can turn on the mainstream media and watch CNN, or
Yeah.
we can turn on, the Octopus Teacher. We could turn on watching David Attenborough on Planet Earth. We
Mm-hmm.
have a choice, and
Yeah.
that's the key. And because we hear garbage in, garbage out. So I want to
Yeah.
make sure what's coming in is helping me, because I've spent my whole life doing the opposite. So now
Mm-hmm.
it's now if I do that, I pay a toll, a spiritual
Yeah.
toll, a physical and mental toll.
Yeah. Yeah. So much of living our best life is a lot of self-care. It really is. And a lot of times people don't know what that looks like. And so I recommend taking some time, sit by yourself and figuring out what are things that seem to excite you or make you feel better or help you express joy or increase that energy or vibration, and making a list, because it's better to have that list and start incorporating it when things are a little bit on the calmer side than when you're in full blown stress mode.
Exactly. Because stress is going to happen. It's
Yeah.
guaranteed. Calamity,
Yeah.
adversities, it's guaranteed it's going to happen. So
Yeah.
because we're practicing these routines every single day, even if it's just 20 minutes of stillness in the morning, and that's all you do
Mm-hmm.
all day, it's
Yeah.
going to make a difference. The problem is we don't commit to it. We say we're going to do it. We do it for 7 days. We got to do it for 7 years. We got to do it for
Yeah.
7 months.
Yeah.
It's something we have to continue doing so that it becomes part of who we are, it becomes part of our character. And that's
Yeah.
why a lot of people avoid someone like me, is because they're like, oh, wait, I haven't been doing the right thing. I'm not going to talk to Jesse
Yeah.
because I don't want to tell him the way I've been living and eating. And that's not
Yeah.
what I want them to do. But it
No.
happens to me all the time. And it's not that I'm better than anyone. It's out of necessity. It's literally
Mm-hmm.
out of necessity. And so I'm really grateful for that. The addiction's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. It's really shifted your life. And now you're having this great impact on hundreds of people, on thousands of people, that if you hadn't gone through what you've gone through and learned all of these steps, all these people would be missing out right now. So, you found your purpose, which is truly a magical thing in our lives. A lot of us don't always find that. So when you do find it, it helps to increase your vibrations and energy and helps so many people. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I just want to mention about purpose. People make purpose to be out this spiritual existential idea, and that's
Mm-hmm.
not what purpose. It can be that, but
Yeah.
that's not what purpose is. My purpose when I was 2 weeks in recovery or 2 weeks sober, my purpose was to do the next right thing every day and not go to prison. That
Yeah.
was my purpose. And then a year later, my purpose was to not fail one of my first classes in college and do the next right thing. So your
Yeah.
purpose continues to evolve. So you don't have to have this existential plan. All your whole life is planned out. You got your 10-year vision.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that. Your purpose can evolve and change. And mine changes almost every single year. My purpose starts to evolve. And so I think that's really going in, running towards your passions and running towards what makes your heart sing helps you to recognize like, oh, this might be part of my purpose, but you don't have to have it all figured out because I certainly don't have it all figured out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why you continue to grow. That's why you continue to explore, listen, read, learn, because it's an evolving journey. Just as we continue to change, our purpose, our addictions, everything changes with us. So one of the, you always hear, if you're not growing, you're dying. That's a great little phrase to kind of help us remind ourselves, what can I learn today that may change me for the better or help me through something? Or who can I meet today? What can I listen to that might change my outlook? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Like I learned, from Hal's book, The Miracle Morning, like, oh, read 10
Mhm.
pages a day. Well, in my book, I say 5 pages a day. Just
Yeah.
5 pages a day. Just take 3 minutes to read
Mhm.
5 pages a day out of a book that lifts you up. Or even
Yeah.
if you don't like to read, listen to 5 minutes of an audiobook
Yeah.
or listen to 5 minutes of a podcast or a YouTube video. But every day, just increase your knowledge, be a lifelong learner, because that really helps when problems come along. There's more options now
Yeah.
because you might have more resources and people you can reach out to, especially in times of crisis, just from taking 5 minutes a day of reading. And so absolutely. And it's not all about knowledge. It's not all about education, but it's really helpful because it helps you to articulate your experiences that you're having.
Mhm.
Also find others that might be able to help your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. So now, right now, you have your business where you help facilitate. Do people work with you one-on-one as well?
Yes, yes. I have a
Okay.
few people that work one-on-one. Usually people that work with me one-on-one though are really serious about change. So
Yeah.
I work with people who it's usually a 1 year term or a 6 month term minimum because
Mhm.
it's hard to get like a miracle to happen in 8 weeks despite what social media and marketing will tell us. So
Yeah.
I think like some habits even take up to 6 months to really instill. So yeah, I do work with some people long term, some people who are not in addiction recovery, but they might be just looking to start just to get a 2021 one to kick it off with better habits. And I'm a habit guy. So yes, I do. And then when it comes to entrepreneurs in recovery and recovery facilitation, I work with a whole wide range of people. And I'm really excited. I'm actually working for right now. This is the first time I've talked about this, but I'm working on
Mhm.
a prison project. I'm building a
Oh.
curriculum and with a guy named Andre Norman, and
Mhm.
we are building a curriculum, 192 lessons, 2-hour lessons that are brought into the prison in South Carolina, and the reason I was able to collaborate and help him build this curriculum is because I learned and I read 5 pages a day because it
Yeah.
led me to learning about how to facilitate change with exchange and how to, you know, use my coach trainings and even heart math trainings to be able to
Mhm.
build this curriculum. So I'm really excited about that, but that's some of the work that's currently happening.
That's absolutely wonderful. I'm excited to hear, in the future how that goes because that population needs help. And if we can start to shift people's thoughts and beliefs and about themselves, we can really make big differences in them. So wonderful job on all that. Really neat. So now, any last minute advice you would give to people who are starting that journey, kind of halfway through the journey, or even struggling?
One of the things I heard today was as you love it, you heal it. As you love it,
Mm.
you heal it. So one
Yeah.
of the ways to start to heal some of these ailments and things that are happening is to start to not look at it as a curse, but as a blessing, to start to love it. Because as you do that, you start to find new solutions to deal with it and to
Yeah.
work with it. So that's really my biggest thing is how can we find ways to love what's happening? And through that attitude, we will find solutions through that to help us. And we'll realize that, hey, you know what? Maybe there's more to life. Maybe there's more to this struggle and this adversity and this disease and all these things that are happening to me. There might be another reason for it, and that will energize you. And I've seen so many people during this time who have come down with all kinds of struggles and ailments turn their mindset into that growth mindset, into that abundance mindset. And it's amazing to watch that. And then you watch them start to heal. And so it's that's my biggest thing is just, don't always look at it as the darkness or curse. Like sometimes you need to love it to heal it.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree with that. That's a great way to end. And how can people reach you? Where can they find more information about you so they get, notification of your book, all of that?
Yeah, they can reach me at, I'll do something different. They can reach me on Instagram at Jesse Harless
Okay.
222. You can DM me on Instagram as one of
Okay.
my mentors says, but you can just reach me at jesseharless.com and you can learn
Okay.
about the book. And if you want to learn more about that, I would just go to that website.
Wonderful. That's great because I know I have many people in my life who suffer through addictions, and I will definitely be sharing them if they aren't able to get on here today. And I know they would really benefit from this. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Amy. It was a pleasure.
Wonderful. So thank you all for watching and tuning in today. Really appreciate your time. I hope this information was helpful. Please reach out to Jesse. Follow him on all the social media so you can grab his book as soon as it comes out in February. Thank you again. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye.